Coming up in today's podcast.
The combine can't stop. The brethren must be reaped. Where is that missing 32 million?
And if we could build a fund of scale where we had critical mass, let's take a number of 500 million.
Like water flowing downhill or a spaceship sucked into a black hole, for the grassroots brethren, or stakeholders as they're now called, their money is gone.
Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Called conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Get a Life. I am Cheryl, and with me today is Richard Marsh. Welcome, Richard.
Hello.
We are both ex-members of the Exclusive Brethren, now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. And today we figured we would end the year with a podcast that gives the true numbers of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Strive 25 was recently held worldwide, where 100% attendance was required. And we feel very strongly that the brethren are being criminally defrauded of huge sums of money on false pretenses. And their genuine faith and goodwill is being aggressively exploited by a small minority of extremely wealthy criminals. Michael Batchelor has heard from inside sources that funds raised to date have fallen far short of the targets set at Strive 25. And this gives us hope that at last, a significant number of current members have found the courage simply to say no to further financial exploitation and bullion. We are recording this podcast to strengthen the hand of every courageous person in the cult to regain autonomy over their affairs. I'm going to hand it over to you, Richard, and let you discuss some of the numbers that you have found.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so a lot of credit goes to Damien Hasty for finding all these numbers for me. He's researched the Brethren's finances very, very extensively, and we will put links to his website below the podcast. So we did a very short podcast just before the Strive 25, in which we made some predictions of what might come up, and we hit the nail on the head. What we forecast was that Strive 25 would consist of an hour or more of fast-talking, UBT-trained marketing executives giving a polished sales patter interspersed with misleading and fragmented financial data. And that's exactly what we got. We also predicted that the flock would be told quite untruthfully that OneSchool Global needed vast sums of money in order to get through the next year. They were. The total sum requested was 255 million Australian dollars, or 190 million US dollars, or 150 million pounds. We presented a bar chart showing that OSG's funding needs are entirely covered by income generated by UBT, school fees, and government grants. And over and above, there is 210 million in spare cash just floating around in bank accounts. This is not including the Vision Foundation endowment funds. So the hard fact is that the sales patter, the slick presentations, and the slippery figures, the emotionally appealing voices of the little children, and the weighty quotations from the great men of the recovery all added up to one thing: a great fat lie. As Adolf Hitler said, and as John Hales repeated in the assembly, the bigger a lie is, the more easily it is believed. The need for $225 million in 2025 is entirely contrived. There is no such need. In fact, as I will prove to you, the biggest problem the PBCC's controlling elite face now is that they have so much money pouring in, they don't know how to get rid of it. So we will start with the total funds held in all the PBCC trusts, non-profits, and investment funds globally. This number includes all the various parts of the Vision Foundation, but not the individual meeting hall trusts or other locally held funds. This number is 1.2 billion Australian dollars, or about $72,000 for every household in the PBCC. While this number makes the PBCC as a whole sound very prosperous, It is not the value that members have received from the church, it is the money that they have given to it in response to years and years of continual aggressive fundraising, claiming that the funds were desperately needed. We'll put a link below to Damien Hastie's excellent article about this. As we're talking in the billions, it's worth noting that the personal wealth of some of the PBCC elite is also measured in these units. For example, COVID contracts worth over $5 billion were awarded to PBCC businesses owned by or connected to the Hales family. So to recap, firstly, OneSchool Global is fully funded by UBT fees and government grants. It does not need any annual fundraisers whatever. Secondly, there is about $1.2 billion stashed away in PBCC trust charities and funds globally, which is enough to meet the entire cost of OneSchool Global for over 4 years. To see how this works in detail, I'm going to look at the UK figures, because one very good thing about the UK is that businesses and charities are obliged to make their accounts publicly available online. Another useful fact is that the UK represents about 1/3 of all PBCC members. We can therefore take the UK figures and multiply by 3 to get a rough idea of the global figures. The numbers that I will quote for the UK will be in pounds sterling, and at the current exchange rate, you can double them to get the Australian dollar number. I'm going to show you the cash flow that funds OneSchool Global in the UK and show you how much surplus there is and where it goes. Most of OneSchool Global's funds come from UBT, and UBT collects that money from all the PBCC members through phone bills, streamlined subscriptions, business seminars, Trove Music, Orbit Travel, car insurance, etc., etc., and they make a profit of over £160,000 every day. Think of the Brethren as a field of wheat, and the UBT is a giant combine harvester driving through it and reaping this constant river of cash. Now, UBT can't keep that money, so it's unloaded into charities like the Grace Trust, just like a combine unloads into a trailer. From the Grace Trust, the vast majority of those funds go to OneSchool Global, and a tiny percentage goes to other charitable causes. If we look at the Charity Commission website on the page for the Grace Trust, we see something very surprising. In 2023, the Grace Trust had an income of £68 million, but an expenditure of only £36 million. That's a very nice problem to have, but it raises 2 questions. Firstly, if OneSchool Global is desperately in need of funds, why would the Grace Trust be holding on to almost half of its income? Secondly, where is that missing 32 million? The answer to the first question is that OneSchool Global is quite adequately funded and only needed half of the Grace Trust income. The answer to the second question is that the surplus, along with the surpluses from many preceding years, is just piling up in the Grace Trust bank account. There is no guesswork or wild speculation about this. It is all carefully reported by the trustees themselves on their 2023 annual report, which you can download. On page 8 of the report, it says, Report of the Trustees for the year ended 31st December 2023. Investments and reserves. The target level of reserves is 10 million to 15 million pounds. This is to enable the level of grants made to be maintained in the short term, even if income decreases. Cash continues to be required to fund grants at short notice. As a result, any surplus resources are held as cash. The trustees are aware that the current level of cash reserves is in excess of this target level. And then lower down it says, on the 31st of December 2023, the reserves of the charity comprised £115.6 million. We can see here that the Grace Trust has got itself into an embarrassing position, and the trustees are trying to justify it in their report to the Charity Commission. Charities are obliged to spend the money they collect for the purposes specified. They're not allowed to just accumulate huge sums of money like the 115 million pounds we see here. That is 3 times their annual expenditure just piling up because they have nothing to spend it on. If you're looking for proof that OneSchool Global doesn't really need any more money from you in 2025, you have it right here. So come back to the analogy of a combine harvester. The combine can't stop. The brethren must be reaped, but the Grace Trust trailer is overflowing. It just can't take any more. So what do? They use another charity, just like bringing up an empty trailer to take the next load. That charity is called the National Assistance Fund, or NAF. And rather than adding to the embarrassing glut of cash at the Grace Trust, UBT is now pouring the gold into NAF, which funnels it right onto OneSchool Global. No doubt in time the NAF will accumulate a surplus, and then another charity will have to be created. So here is the annual report of the NAF, and as it says, it's in the early stages of its development. In other words, it has just recently taken over as the PBCC's financial fire hose from the Grace Trust. Trustees Report, 31st of December 2023. Objectives and activities. Charitable objectives. The charitable purposes of the National Assistance Fund are the advancement of education by assisting schools which provide education in accordance with the religious ethos of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, and so on. From the NAF's pie chart, we can see that in 2023, it funneled £34 million from the UBT to OneSchool Global, thereby taking the pressure off the overloaded Grace Trust. In approximate figures, we know the total cost of OSG globally per year is 345 million Australian dollars, which is about 172 million pounds. The UK accounts for about 1/3 of OneSchool Global students, so the OneSchool Global operating costs for the UK must be close to 60 million pounds. The Grace Trust and the NAF between them had a 2023 income of about 100 million, of which 30 million was retained. The balance of 70 million was more than enough to fund OneSchool Global. So that is how OneSchool Global is funded in the UK, quite independently of any annual Strive fundraisers, bake sales, loose change collections, or sponsored bike rides. You don't need to give them a penny. You fund them abundantly and to excess through UBT, Campus & Co. and the other initiatives. In fact, it would be a kindness not to give them anything because the poor trustees have simply run out of things to spend it on. So that's the UK, but what is the global situation? As Damien Hastie has pointed out, the UK neatly represents 1/3 of the PBCC. Australia and New Zealand make up the second third, and the rest of the world, being USA, Canada, France, Germany, and a few other countries, make up the rest. I'm sure that Australia and New Zealand are financially much better off than the UK. Not only do they have more and larger businesses, but they also have extensive government funding for their schools. The rest of the world third contains some poorer localities in the Caribbean and Argentina, but that is a small proportion of the whole. Overall, it is reasonable to assume that the UK is representative of the whole, and that by multiplying the UK figures by 3, we can estimate the total. In 2023, UBT in the UK, which is the main funding source for OneSchool Global, ran a surplus of £32 million. Multiplied by 3, that suggests a global annual surplus from UBT of £96 million, or 192 million Australian dollars. What is more, we see that the Grace Trust has accumulated these surpluses year on year to a total of £115.6 million. If the same accumulation has taken place in the other 2/3 of the PBCC, it suggests a global savings pot of £347 million, or nearly $700 million. We know that the total PBCC charitable funds are about $2.2 billion. So it is quite reasonable to suppose that $700 million of this came from UBT surpluses and the balance from other sources, such as the accumulated donations from annual Strive fundraisers. So again, the question, with such an embarrassment of surplus funds, why is the PBCC asking you for that one number of $225 million? It should be slashing your school fees, halving your phone bill, and giving you a nice fat rebate check. So in the next section, I'm going to look at the Vision Foundation Endowment Fund. Out of the $1.2 billion in PBCC charitable trust and investment funds, more than half are in one of the various Vision Foundation entities, a total of at least $650 million. The Vision Foundation was launched at Strive 17 with this video featuring Phil McNaughton and Bruce Hales' son-in-law, Lester Martin.
So it's introduced as good evening. We are pleased to provide an update on the endowment fund that was announced at Vision 17 in January. The endowment fund is a key global initiative which will help provide ongoing funding for our schools and other social welfare programs to protect the education and well-being of our future generations. This fund is now called the Vision Foundation.
Sadly, the video is no longer online, but the placeholder for it shows Phil McNaughton on the left and Lester Martin on the right, just about to explain their amazing scheme to the assembled brethren. Both these characters have since departed from public service in very unfortunate and distressing circumstances, if the rumours from inside are to be believed. Apparently, and we cannot confirm this, Phil McNaughton had a serious nervous breakdown in March following the ATO raids on the UBT headquarters at the precinct and was hospitalised. What we do know for certain is that UBTA, the Australian UBT Accountants, of which he was a director, suddenly announced that it was permanently closing its doors in May, and that Phil McNaughton resigned from UBT in the UK in June, and was removed as a director of the various Vision Foundation entities in November. As for Lester Martin, who had married Bruce Hales' favourite daughter, rumour has it that his interest in figures extended well beyond the realms of accounting, which led to matrimonial difficulties. Jumping forward 6 years now to Strive 23, Vision Foundation was heavily promoted with an extended recording of Bruce Hales personally appealing to the brethren to put half of their income into the scheme, based on Luke's Gospel, chapter 19, verse 8, where Zacchaeus the tax gatherer says, "The half of my goods I give to the poor." Jeremy Joyce, one of Australia's richest brethren after the Haleses, explained the whole plan. Here is what he said.
The performance of the Vision Foundation is really, really awesome. So the way we track this, we measure ourselves to how some of our peers, take the Harvard University, for instance, their endowment fund. How is that performing? What's their strategy? And we understand what they're trying to do to get the returns they get. Generally, the returns, some of these larger endowment funds range between 6 to 10%. We can see a path to do quite a bit better than that because of the great businesses we're investing in. We have a great management team and the opportunities to invest in a diverse range of other asset classes. The Vision Foundation is absolutely essential to funding the future generations. And if we could build a fund of scale where we had critical mass, let's take a number of 500 million. If we could do that and we could generate annual returns of, let's say, set ourselves a target at 20%, that would provide $100 million a year to the ecosystem.
Apart from the rather hubristic assumption that Harvard University is a peer, this is a clear and concise statement of how an endowment fund works. The key concept is return on investment. The 500 million capital is invested in such a way that every year it produces an additional $100 million without the capital ever being reduced. The $100 million can then be used to subsidize the school, and there can be a big reduction in school fees and no need for the massive annual fundraisers. While the donors do not expect to get the capital back, they do expect to receive benefits in the form of subsidized education or financial assistance for themselves or for their friends and families of 20% per year, and so to have received benefits of equal value to the whole investment after a few years and to continue to benefit further thereafter. To take Jeremy's example, the Harvard Endowment Fund paid out $2.2 billion to the university in 2023 and has paid out consistently every year for over 120 years. At the time of Strive 23, the Vision Endowment Fund had been running for 5 years and, as far as we know, had not returned any money to the ecosystem. At this point, I'm going to stop and give you a practical demonstration of what a return on investment is, and more importantly, what it is not. This may look like a jam jar, but it is actually the Vision Foundation Endowment Fund, which I hope will give me a return on investment of 20% per annum. I'm going to invest $1 in it for a year and see what happens.
1 year later.
Okay, here goes. I now have $1.20. And if I leave the dollar in the pot, I can take out 20 cents every year from now on. So where did the 20 cents come from? The Vision Fund loaned my dollar to a widget store who bought a $1 widget and by clever UBT marketing strategy sold it for $1.20. This is not a new idea. As my audience is mostly brethren, I'll give you a scripture quote, Matthew 25. For it is as if a man going away out of the country called his own bondmen and delivered to them his substance. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his particular ability, and immediately went away out of the country. And he that had received the 5 talents went and trafficked with them, and made 5 other talents. In like manner also he that had received the 2, he also gained 2 others. But he that had received the 1 went and dug in the earth and hid the money of his Lord. Okay, if you don't understand return on investment now, you never will. Now I'm going to show you something else that happens with my Vision Foundation Endowment Fund. I'm going to put $1 in at the beginning of the year. Six months later, I decided to put some more money into the fund. I put in a further 20 cents. At the end of the year, I unscrew the lid of my Vision Foundation Endowment Fund, and here is what I have. $1.20. So what is my return on investment this time? Nothing. Zip, zilch, nada. The fund has grown, but at my expense. No money has been made at all. No money has come in from outside the ecosystem, so to speak, so there is no profit to benefit the donors. So keep all that in mind as we jump forward in time to Strive 25, just 1 month ago. Here is what was said about the Vision Investment Fund at Strive 25. Listen carefully and tell me what the return on investment was.
Now to Vision Foundation. And Vision Foundation is all about growing the nest egg for the future generations by investing and generating healthy returns. At Strive 2024, we set a goal for Vision Foundation to grow the nest egg by 20%. And we're thankful to say that this has been achieved ahead of time, driven by 2 key factors. Firstly, being that there was strong performance from the investments, It's driven up the valuations of the investments that we've invested in. And secondly is the generous donations from those who have recently sold businesses. Some businesses have donated up to 15% of the proceeds when they've sold, and for this we are incredibly thankful. Now, as we look forward to 2025, we continue the accumulation phase, building out the foundation, and we're aiming to grow it by a further 15%. To achieve this, we'll be relying heavily on donations from successful business sales.
So what is the answer? There is no answer. At this point, the Vision Foundation Fund contains at least $650 million and has been running for 7 years. But the presenter completely fails to tell the donors what the return on investment was. We heard from a number of current members after Strive 25, and they all had the impression the 20% return on investment had been achieved. That is exactly what they were intended to believe. They were not allowed to record the presentation or to take notes. Fortunately, we did record it. You will find a link to the transcript below. So let's analyze what the presenter at Strive 25 actually said line by line. Vision Foundation is all about growing the nest egg for future generations by investing and generating healthy returns. Clearly, this introduces a statement about return on investment. He uses the words investing and returns. The next line he says is, at Strive 2024, we set a goal for Vision Foundation to grow the nest egg by 20%. And we're thankful to say that this has been achieved ahead of time, driven by two key factors. Firstly, being that there was a strong performance from the investments. It's driven up the valuations of the investments that we've invested in. There is no doubt that this refers to a return on investments. Very impressive. But then things start to get a bit murky. His next line is, and secondly, is the generous donations from those who have recently sold businesses. Some businesses have donated up to 15% of the proceeds when they're sold, and for this we are incredibly thankful. Here we have suddenly changed to donations. In other words, more money being put into the fund by donors. That is the opposite of return on investment. So the 20% growth of the nest egg was not all from a return on investment. It was partly from more donations from community members being put into the pot. As the presenter has mixed the two numbers up, it's impossible to say what the real return on investment is. The 20% growth might only be a 1% return on investment and a 19% of extra donors putting further funds in. It gets worse. The presenter goes on to say, now, as we look forward to 2025, we continue the accumulation phase, building out the foundation, and we're aiming to grow it by a further 15%. To achieve this, we will be relying heavily on donations from successful business sales. Now, this is about as clear as mud. The presenter is now definitely talking about putting more community funds into the pot, and not about a return on investment at all. But he connects the further 15% growth to his previous 20% target, which now makes it look as if it is all just adding money and no investment profits at all. The other obvious question is this. If a 20% return on investment had been achieved on the $650 million invested, where is the $130 million dividend to be paid out to OneSchool Global? There is no mention of that at all. In fact, while at Strive 23, the Vision Foundation was very strongly stated to be an endowment fund like Harvard's for the purpose of funding the schools, by Strive 25, it had become a nest egg for future generations, with no suggestion of a regular payout to OneSchool Global in the foreseeable future. According to Inside Contacts, Bruce Hale says that the rapture will be in 2029 give or take 6 months. What future generations will benefit then? Or is it perhaps for those of us that are left behind? If it had just been my dollar in my jam jar endowment fund, it would not be a big issue. But when 45,000 people have been bullied, pestered, guilt-tripped, cajoled and coerced into giving away $650 million on the promise of a 20% return, this is shocking. In fact, it's criminal. The Strive 25 presenters were not just improvising. They were reading carefully prepared, scripted speeches from a teleprompter. This is a perfectly deliberate piece of deception, crafted to avoid any outright lies while concealing the truth and designed to give an entirely false impression. There are, however, other ways to find out what the return on investment on Vision Foundation is, like asking them, for example. A week ago, I sent an email to inquiries.au@globalfundingteam.com. This is what it says. Vision Foundation podcast inquiry. Dear Global Funding Team, it was good to hear your representative Tim Drake on the Strive 25 presentation. I note that your motto is coordination, transparency, communication. As a parent of OneSchool Global students and someone who has contributed well in excess of $100,000 of my personal funds to OneSchool Global or its predecessors, I would like some transparency and communication from you about Vision Foundation, VF, which is heavily promoted by GFT as an endowment fund akin to the Harvard Endowment Fund, but with the prospect of offering an astonishing 20% return on investment. My simple questions to you are as follows. 1. How much money has been invested to date in Vision Foundation in all of its various manifestations around the globe? 2. What has the return on investment, rather than the mere addition of further funds to the pot, been on those invested funds? 3. How much of that return on investment has been returned to the PBCC community in terms of subsidized education and assistance for members in poverty? I'm writing the script for a Get a Life podcast on the subject of Vision Foundation to be broadcast next week. I hope I do not have to report that you have refused to answer these simple questions. Sincerely, Richard Marsh.
And did you hear?
No. Well, I'm still waiting for an answer to that. But there is yet another way to shine a light on the question. In some countries where Vision Foundation funds have been set up, there is a legal requirement to provide an annual public account of the fund's performance. Here is an example from the accounts of the New Zealand Vision Income Fund. We will attach links to all this public data so you can check it for yourself. The bottom 2 lines are the ones to look at. The income is the return on investment, and the net assets is the total sum invested. In 2023, they made $3 million on an investment of $98 million, that is about 3% return on investment, while in 2024 they made $6.8 million on an investment of $136 million, that is about 5% return on investment. Damien Hasty has obtained the latest accounts for all the Vision entities for which these are available, and here they are in this table. So this is what the table shows. Vision Income Fund New Zealand. Profits in the last 12-month accounting period, 6,773,619. Capital at the end of the accounting period, 136,076,777. Management and professional fees, 3,708,494. Return on investment is 4.98%. Then Vision Income Fund Australia, profits in the last 12-month accounting period is 16,415,069. Capital at the end of the accounting period is 424,777,000. 956,455. Management and professional fees, 879,937. Return on investment, 3.86%. Vision Foundation Fund UK, profits unknown, capital end of last accounting period, 47,300,000. No information on management fees or return on investment. Vision Global Growth Fund UK, profits in last 12-month accounting period, no information. Capital at end of accounting period, 24,727,270. No information on management or return on investment. The information does not cover all of the various vision entities, but it does cover most of the value, as by far the largest sums were invested in Australia and New Zealand. The return on investment in New Zealand was 4.98%, but the inflation in the New Zealand dollar over that period was 5.73%. So rather than generating a 20% return on investment, those funds were actually worth less at the end of 2023 than at the beginning. Note also the astonishingly high 3.78 million in management fees. If I was a New Zealand investor, I would be asking some very pointed questions about that.
Yeah, I agree.
In Australia, the return on investment was 3.86% against inflation of 5.62% in the Australian dollar. An even heavier loss on nearly $500 million of the Brethren's money. While we do not have the overall return on investment for the UK vision funds, we do have the returns made by various PBCC charities that invested in them. In 2022, the Grace Trusts, the Central GH Trust, and the NAF invested a total of £27.45 million into a short-lived entity called Vision Investment Fund LP. After a year, this investment was only worth 28.3 million, a return on investment of about 3%, and again in real terms, a loss. Small wonder that the Strive 25 spokesman was keen to muddy the waters. And no wonder there was no 120 million injection of cash into OneSchool Global from the scheme. It was actually losing millions of dollars in real terms. Let's change the subject a bit here and talk about affinity fraud. The following article from Wikipedia needs no comment at all. The applicability of this to Vision Foundation is obvious.
Affinity fraud is a form of investment fraud in which the fraudster preys upon members or identifiable groups, such as religious or ethnic communities, language minorities, the elderly, or professional groups. The fraudsters who promote affinity scams frequently are or successfully pretend to be members of the group. They often enlist respected community or religious leaders from within the group to spread the word about the scheme, by convincing those people that a fraudulent investment is legitimate and worthwhile. Many times, those leaders become unwitting victims of the fraudster's ruse. Those scams involve exploitation of the trust and friendship that exist in groups of people who have something in common. Because of the tight-knit structure of many groups, it can be difficult for regulators or law enforcement officials to detect an affinity scam. Victims often fail to notify authorities or pursue legal remedies and instead try to work things out within the group. This is particularly true where the fraudsters have used respected community or religious leaders to convince others to join the investment. Many affinity scams involve Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes, where newly received investor money is used by the fraudster to make payments to early investors to give the illusion that the investment is successful.
If you're a PBCC member and you're thinking of donating yet more money to a Vision Foundation entity, just ask yourself how many red lights you are prepared to run in order to lose that money to an organization that clearly has no need for it. Consider for a moment that both Vision Foundation and the global funding team's address is The Precinct, Level 6, 10 Herb Elliott Avenue, Sydney Olympic Park, New South Wales 2127. This office was raided by the Australian Tax Office in March, and extensive global investigations are ongoing. Might it not be better to wait until the investigations are concluded before putting any more cash down that particular rabbit hole? I understand that the average value of a PBCC member's mortgage stands at $525,000. What sense is there in sinking money into a so-called investment scheme that offers zero return while paying a heavy interest on your mortgage? If you have already made a pledge, then I suggest you send a list of reasonable and prudent questions such as any investor might ask to your local tax gatherer and insist on getting full answers before parting with a dime. Finally, I want to look at all these Vision Foundation edifices in terms of money laundering. In February, Get a Life episode 94, Steve Simmons, a former OneSchool Global trustee, exposed Gareth Hales's ingenious money laundering scheme whereby millions of charitably gifted tax-free donations were effectively laundered into his pockets by coercing OneSchool Global campuses to give construction contracts to Unispace at highly inflated prices. It was a complex scheme and comes under the heading of trade-based money laundering, whereby funds were illegally transferred under the guise of incorrectly priced commercial contracts. This type of money laundering is on the increase in the PBCC as the wealthy elite who control everything become more desperate to move the embarrassingly large sums out of the charity's bank accounts before it attracts unwanted attention from the regulators. In fact, at Strive 25, two massive programs of this type were unveiled. Here are a couple of quotes. It is inspiring to see the impact that the campus modernization program is having on students across the globe, with 46 projects completed and a further 70 underway. We've also progressed well on the hall standardization program, with face-to-face workshops being held with our global teams for HVAC, audio, and seating. Many of the OneSchool Global campuses are brand new and purpose-built. It is hard to understand why this extensive and expensive modernization program is needed on 116 campuses out of the global total of 125. I have no doubt at all that the most valuable construction and supply contracts will go to a small number of elite PBCC businesses with only a token gesture towards getting competitive quotes. The same can be said of the truly bizarre hall standardization program. Our inside contacts tell us that this is a project to make every PBCC hall precisely identical in every detail. This will involve stripping out and replacing perfectly sound acoustic paneling because it is the wrong shade of wood, ripping out unworn carpets because they're the wrong color or pattern, and replacing perfectly good seating because it was not identical to the Australian standard. No doubt again that elite and uber-wealthy, Hales-connected businesses such as Halfwoods will be the sole source for the new carpets, paneling, etc. in these unnecessary works. However, in terms of money laundering, these construction project-based schemes are clumsy and inefficient. Real goods must be bought and sold as a cover for the large excesses tagged into the invoices, and there's always the danger that some trustee with integrity might cause problems and have to be savagely ejected as Steve Simmons was. How much simpler Vision Foundation is, and yet it achieves exactly the same end. The donations to Vision Foundation pass through one or other of the PBCC charities, thereby gaining that generous tax credit from the government. They're then invested into one of the many Vision entities. Vision in turn invests those funds directly into that small elite set of extremely wealthy businesses that are closely associated with the Hales family. It is obvious from the results so far that these businesses have no obligation to provide a 20% return on investment. In fact, it seems there have been no returns at all. As far as the businesses are concerned, these are just cheap loans. Nor is there any evidence that these loans have to be repaid at any time. And what is the difference between a permanent loan and a gift? If you want to understand how the PBCC works, just follow the money. It flows steadily and consistently from the pockets of the 44,000 ordinary, hard-working PBCC members. It flows through a variety of tortuous and perhaps illegal tax evasion mechanisms, and it all ends up in the same place, in the greedy hands of a tiny minority of extremely wealthy business owners who are close affiliates of the leading Hales family. And another question to ask yourself, aren't the wealthy elites that are benefiting from this scheme the same persons who are running it? And one thing is certain, it is a one-way trip, like water flowing downhill or a spaceship sucked into a black hole. For the grassroots brethren, or stakeholders as they're now called, their money is gone. The 650 million you trustingly poured into the Vision endowment will never return. We've put together for you a short list of points that you ought to consider before making any further investment in any of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's charitable or fundraising entities.
Vision Foundation is promoted through marketing that you are compelled to watch, and for which you have to dress in church clothes, and for which local priests watch you through your TV camera to make sure you are watching. Do you think this is normal?
Where is the Vision Foundation money? Unlike normal endowment funds, Vision Foundation does not disclose what businesses it has invested money into or on what terms. Where there is no disclosure, there is no accountability.
Secrecy. Investors would not dare to ask questions for fear of being stigmatized as disloyal. Brethren are told, it's all being well looked after from the top, and don't question, just do.
Vision Foundation is not a registered and accredited endowment fund. It consists of multiple funds under different names in different jurisdictions. Donations to Vision Foundation in Canada and the USA simply disappear. There is no registered Vision Fund owned by the Brethren in either country.
Dishonesty. Promised returns of 20% return on investment have not happened, but investors are being deceived by deliberate mixing up of additional investment and return on investment numbers to make it appear that a 20% return on investment has been achieved.
Adding fresh incoming funds to give the impression that an investment scheme is gaining a large return on investment is the basis on which all pyramid and Ponzi financial frauds are constructed.
Because funds for Vision pass through a PBCC charity first, Vision has no accountability to the donors. It is only answerable to the charity trustees. These charity trustees belong to the same clique of wealthy elites using Vision funds as cheap loans for their businesses.
More dishonesty. OneSchool Global is fully funded by UBT, Campus & Co. government subsidies and other initiatives. OneSchool Global does not need an endowment fund, nor does it need annual Strive fundraising, but these facts are all concealed from the Brethren. Vision Foundation was sold to the Brethren at Strive 23 as a school endowment fund that would put $100 million every year into OneSchool Global from capital of $500 million. It now has well over $650 million, pays nothing to OneSchool Global, and is described as a nest egg for future generations. If the rapture is so close, what future generations will benefit?
Vision Foundation claims it will invest in top Plymouth Brethren Christian Church businesses for a 20% return. Why would a business take an investment from Vision at 20% when it could borrow the same money from the bank at 5%?
Vision Foundation accounts show actual return on investment of between 3% and 5%. Did these elite PBCC businesses really fail to turn a profit on the investment, or did they simply pocket it? If they failed to turn a profit, they must be incompetent. If they pocketed it, they're criminals. Vision Foundation has now been operating for 7 years and has taken over $650 million from the Brethren. Yet at Strive 25, addressing all 54,000 members, Their spokesman can't give a straight answer about the return on this investment, nor are the brethren told where their money is or what it is being used for. The Campus Modernization Program and the Hall Standardization Program are quite obviously money laundering schemes to spend the huge surplus of charitable funds with elite PBCC businesses, thus further enriching the wealthiest 1% of the brethren. Imposition of central control over both schools and meeting hall trusts means that local trustees cannot oppose or refuse these extravagant and unnecessary expenses.
Thanks so much, Richard, for explaining all that. And it lays it out in a way that I think anybody could sit down and really understand where their money is going and why it's not coming back. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, believe me, it's just great to get it off my chest.
And they do, they really appreciate it. I mean, all the feedback we always get is it's very,
Not all of them appreciate it, Cheryl.
well, the people that want the money don't appreciate it, but those that want to save their money sure appreciate it.
It's good to have some of them shaking quite badly because it only takes one person to report, you know.
Yeah.
They're in a very fragile state.
Yeah. So hang on to your money. They don't need it. It comes down to that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Get a Life team just wants to wish everyone happy holidays and a incredible New Year's. Stay tuned. We have lots in the works for 2025, and we will be back in January. Have a great holiday from all of us. Thank you so much. We're going to end this podcast on a lighter note, and here's a short video that explains how investment fund managers work. Enjoy it. Until next time, everyone, much love to you all. Bye-bye.
Do I really have to do this, Dad?
Stan, now more than ever, you need to understand the importance of saving money.
But Grandma said I could use this money to buy whatever I want.
Okay, next please. Go on, Stanley.
I got a $100 check from my grandma, and my dad said I need to put it in the bank so it can grow over the years.
Well, that's fantastic. A really smart decision, young man. We can put that check in a money market mutual fund. Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
What?
It's gone. It's all gone.
What's all gone?
The money in your account. It didn't do too well. It's gone.
What do you mean? I have $100.
Not anymore, you don't. Poof.
Well, what can I do to get back
I'm sorry, sir, but this line is for bank members only.
I just opened an account.
Do you have any money invested with this bank?
No, you just lost it all.
Then please stand aside for people who actually have money with us. Next, please.
Hey!
Hello, Mrs. Farnickel. How are you today? Making a deposit, are we? Great. We can just put that into your retirement account and make it go to work for you, and it's gone.
What?
Sorry, yeah, that's gone. Please step aside for people who actually have money with the bank. Next, please.
Dad!
Hey, I'm trying to teach my son the importance of savings. You already lost his money? Oh, Mr. Marsh, don't worry. We can just transfer money from your account into a portfolio with your son, and it's gone! This line is for people who have money with the bank only. Please step aside.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.